Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Sean Smith, publisher of MedTech Leading Voice. Welcome everybody to Mastering Post-Market Surveillance Tough Questions. We have a great lineup today. Just a couple housekeeping notes before I turn it over to moderator Martin King. Use the chat vigorously throughout this webinar. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, but we also do want your tough questions. So please feel free to submit them using the chat button at any point. And when we get to the lightning round, we will definitely try to cover everything. Thank you. And
hello, everybody. I'm Martin King. I've been around in medical devices since 1979. In those days, we had a law dating back, I was in the UK, we had a law dating back to 1968, which was mostly pharma-based and really regarded medical devices as a bit of a sideshow. And there were some standards about electrical safety and things like that. But that's about all we had. And now we have this luxury of fantastic regulations, which are perhaps for some people a burden because they didn't have them before. But now we have the power to apply them to help us run our business efficiently, to know our devices, to know our products well, and to actually spy on the market and see what's happening to everybody else, and to perhaps find out what other mistakes people are making so that we don't make the same ones. So why PMS matters? Well, first of all, if you're doing business in the EU, there's a regulatory obligation. You have to do post-market surveillance. And why? Well, it's really going to help you. And it's not just doing the stuff that you have to do for post-market surveillance, but it's going to help you overall because you're watching what's going on in the market. It will allow you to navigate that market. And we'll come on to this later, but there are some pieces about other countries around the world are also looking for CE marks and things like that. So it's very good to get an EU certification. But the fastest route right now is still through the US. But that's another story. So perhaps we should go on to meeting our fantastic lineup of panelists that have all joined us today. And so we have Karandeep from QRA Medical. EU MDR can't be with us, but they're going to give us an ebook that will be available at the end of the presentation. We have Marina from Intrinsic Medical Group, Michelle from Lean RAQA, and Ajda from Obellis Group. So an excellent start. Karandeep, would you like to say something and introduce yourself?
Sure. So, yep, thank you very much for that introduction. So, hi, I'm Karandeep, and I'm a quality and regulatory consultant working within medical devices. I started my career working within your traditional devices, such as your pacemakers, defibrillators, etc. However, I started transitioning over the past 3 years more into software medical devices as well. I'm also a content creator on LinkedIn where I like to teach people about quality and regulatory affairs, trying to simplify as much as possible. And I'm also host of the MedTech podcast.
Hello, everyone. So I could say that it's my turn. So my name is Marina Daineko. I'm subject matter expert in biological evaluation area, and I am within medical device industry more than 8 years. I am working with very different medical devices, from the simplest one till like complex ones that can combine software, firmware, as well as hardware. I have experience in R&D, research and development, as well as regulatory affairs, and I believe it's exactly what stands out me from other experts in this area, because I can do biological evaluation with knowledge of R&D as well as regulatory affairs, so to consider medical device from different perspectives. Yeah, so I'm very excited to be here. And if you have like some additional questions or would like just to deep your knowledge around biological relation, please follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lott with Lean RAQA. We are a medical device regulatory and quality consulting firm, and we help startups and small and mid-sized companies find the right size solutions for their regulatory and quality problems. Everything from early concept development, regulatory strategy, we walk them all the way through the process and into commercialization. And then we help support that PMS phase that we're going to be talking about today, particularly with fractional regulatory and quality services, similar to what you would have with a fractional CFO. So be sure to go to my website and get tools that will help you with these analysis, like the regulatory pathway assessment and the business market assessment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Martin. So my name is Ajda. I'm from Obellis Group. We provide authorized representative services to mostly non-EU manufacturers who are entering the EU market. And we also do consultancy on EU regulations now for 35 years. Within Obellis, my role is to monitor regulatory developments on the EU, UK, and Swiss markets that have an impact on compliance of our clients. And we do that through our information platforms. The most relevant for the MedTech community is the information platform MD Law that I manage since the beginning now, since the MDR was adopted, so for more than 6 years. So I'm very pleased to be with you here today, and I'm going to share some points of attention from the side of regulatory developments in the EU.
We've got like a point system here, and it would be really great if people just put in the chat, you either type a number, or if there's a reason for other reason that you're here, you know, you just like us, write it in the chat. It would be really great to get this feedback to understand why people are coming and participating. Did we make the right noise on LinkedIn? And we really would appreciate this interaction on the chat to understand, you know, why people are here and what they want to see and what's going on. Yeah, we're already at the roundtable discussion, didn't we have a? So let's have a look at this. So Misha, would you like to start us off with the FDA's approach to post-market surveillance and what we should be thinking about if we're going to the US with all our hard work done in Europe?
Sure. So the format of the post-market surveillance in the US does take a slightly different approach in that it's not as, it has different utility than it does in Europe for things like the clinical evaluation report and the PSUR and PMCF events. So in the US, it plays, I think, two really big parts in both where you use post-market in a pre-market context. And the first is a risk management. So when you go to do a 510K, right now that's a gap in the FDA guidances about where do you include your risk management file at all. And so, you know, you usually follow whatever type of device it is and put it like maybe in the electrical safety section, maybe in the software section. But the FDA is, even though it's not clear where to put it in the FDA guidance for contents of a 510K, they expect to see a complete risk management file. And on a new device, you're not going to have any analysis on your own products usually, unless you're using yourself as a predicate. So you're going to need to have looked at things like reasonable misuse. Have you considered things that your competitors have been recalled for or have had 483s, and to see could my product reasonably have those same failures? So in that case, you're going to use your competitors' post-market data to feed your risk management that's going to go into your pre-market submission. I think the other big change recently, or that projects what is coming from the FDA, is this guidance that they published about a month ago about how to select the best predicate. And for that, they for the first time ever specifically said, you need to include a justification for which predicate that you picked, which includes looking at things like the safety signals that are on your predicate comparator, the 483s, the adverse events, recalls, all of that. The FDA expects to see a justification for that your predicate doesn't have known safety issues. So to make the case for both of those, the risk management and the predicate selection, you're going to have to rely on post-market surveillance, not only in the US, but even on a global perspective.
Great, thank you very much. I really think the whole point about risk management, I mean, doing the post-market piece, just to get your probabilities built up on your P1 and P2 values is of huge value, especially if you have a new device where you don't have real-world evidence of your own. It's just a huge, huge benefit.
Right, and to quantify it, on a global level, if you look at just what was distributed in the US, it might look like you have a problem based off of the number of units distributed versus the number of adverse events. But if you look at it on a global scale, maybe statistically you don't have a problem.
Right. Great. So, Marina, you got something to add about biological evaluation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to start with the definition of biological safety. Actually, what is biological safety, to make it, to have a baseline? Biological safety is defined as freedom from unacceptable biological risks in context of intended use. So what does it mean? It means actually that we are doing biological evaluation to evaluate whether our medical device has or doesn't have unacceptable biological risks, as well as to generate evidence for the patients to be sure that the medical device is biologically safe, right? But what is interesting actually here is that it's common sense, as well as according to the standard ISO 10993-1, that test results as well as performed biological evaluation cannot guarantee freedom of potential biological hazards. And it's very clear and transparent stated within the standard ISO 10993-1 current version from 2018 that the medical device shall be we need to proceed with biological investigation when our medical device is used on humans during clinical use, meaning in real life, right? So, and in terms that from post-market surveillance, it's exactly when this data can come from, because we should review different complaints, assess whether they relate to biological safety, and so on and so forth. Also, it's very important to notice that one of the change that can trigger biological re-evaluation is evidence that our medical device can produce some adverse biological reaction. So, for instance, from the data from post-market surveillance, we could see some allergic reaction or something like this. And it would be a bell for us that we need to re-evaluate and maybe to proceed with further testing or to do some changes to our medical device. Yeah, it's general information I would like to share with everyone, and I am welcome any questions regarding this topic that would be soon.
Great, thank you very much. So Ajda, would you like to tell us something about the evolving landscape around the whole MDR, IVDR story?
Yeah, definitely. And there are quite many things happening. So I even prepared some slides. Maybe it's going to assist with the presentation. So if you allow me, I'll just quickly share my screen so we can all follow it a bit better. So first, I want to focus on the beginning of this year when you had this extended legacy period announced. And this, of course, impacts mostly the legacy device manufacturers. You might know those are those devices that benefit from a special status because they were, for example, certified under the directive. But however, they need to comply with certain MDR requirements. And here I want to, of course, focus on the PMS. You already know that, of course, there should be PMS compliant with the MDR since the date of application, also for legacy manufacturers. But what is new now this year, there is also this condition that they should compile a compliant quality management system. And PMS system is kind of an integral part of this QMS, and this by actually May next year. So very important to keep this deadline in mind. So that's one first thing. There is this extra time, but pay attention. It's not kind of a free ticket to enjoy more time on the market. So second thing is, of course, what's happening. We all know there are the regulations that we can look at as a first step, but then always we say, let's look at the guidances that the MDCG is releasing, because this is the group that is interpreting what the law says. And here I just want to mention the well-known PSUR guidance that has a template inside, but also the templates for both PMCF plan and report, because we hear that notified bodies are expecting that the industry follows those templates. And then, of course, the second question comes, what are we still waiting for? So there is this, let's say, main guidance on PMS that should have been released earlier this year, and it's still, let's say, in the pipeline. And then we also need to watch out for all these guidances and templates, both of PSUR and PMCF, to be adapted to the IVDR. Bear with me for two more, let's say, updates that I found.
Can you flick through your slides? They're not changing.
Can you see it?
We see the first slide.
That's odd, because I'm on the...
Ah, fantastic.
Sorry for that. So just, let's say, on the first two slides, I hope I was clear enough. So where I also want to, let's say, bring your attention is to EUDAMED. Just earlier this week, the European Commission announced a further delay to EUDAMED database. You know that this was done already a couple of times in the past years. Here, the essential thing is to remember that until EUDAMED is not fully functional, all the, let's say, obligations linked to EUDAMED are not mandatory. However, you might need to respect certain, let's say, directive-based registration, let's say, obligations. And here again, I want to mention MDCG, because they did release a document on how, for example, to comply with this obligation of uploading PSUR to EUDAMED. They said that you should agree to your notified body on the appropriate means to share it, and they gave this example of secure email. And the very last, let's say, update is something I wanted to share, is because we see that competent authorities in Europe are looking at the PMS and whether the industry does respect those requirements. Let's say the most public one was the one from Swissmedic, the Swiss competent authorities, and they found that 70% of Class 1 manufacturers do not adequately implement those requirements, even though we are already quite far from the date of the application. And then just maybe a final quote there from Swissmedic that I found in the report. And just so you know, you can always go to MD Lott to get all these updates, and I'm going to leave my email in case you wish to receive my slides. Thank you. And sorry for the technical issues in the beginning.
Thank you. Karandeep, would you like to tell us something about PSUR, PMCF?
Yes, of course. So we'll start off with PSUR, which is something that came, of course, with the EU MDR. Now, PSUR effectively stands for Periodic Safety Update Report and is a requirement under the MDR that wasn't a requirement under the old MDD. So first of all, what exactly is a PSUR? It's basically a summary of the results of the post-market surveillance activities, as well as the various different conclusions that you draw from those results. You know, what are your findings? Are there any new risks that you found? Have risks come down? Have risks gone up, etc.? And of course, the report would also take into account any corrective actions that you've taken, any description rationale, etc., that must be included in this report. So think of it as your periodic safety update report, although it forms a part of your quality management system, is also a part of the device's technical documentation, and you have to keep updating it. So how often do you have to update this? Now, generally for high-risk devices, this means devices that are 2A or above under EU MDR as well as implantables, PSUR is required. For class 1, it's not. For class 2A medical devices, the PSUR requirement is that you do it every 2 years. Anything above that, it must be submitted annually, and you're required to put this on UDMED. Then the second part of that we have, of course, is the post-market clinical follow-up, which again is one of the PMS requirements under EU MDR. So the post-market clinical follow-up itself for medical devices is meant to be a proactive method of gathering clinical data. We're trying to move away from the reactive method. We're waiting for things to go wrong. We'd rather have be proactive and get them early on effectively. And one of the most crucial parts of your post-market surveillance activities is, of course, your PMCF. So make sure that you do that properly. So generally, the aim of a post-market clinical follow-up system is to basically try and identify any previously unknown side effects. So this is something that's very important for novel devices, something that hasn't been out there on the market. Once it's actually on the market, it's there for a few years or a few months. You may then start seeing side effects or risks that basically weren't apparent when you was in the development phases. Also, another thing as well, your PMCF is also part of your clinical evaluation as part of Annex 14 of the EU MDR. Now, it's important to note that not every single medical device needs a post-market clinical follow-up. Some of the lower moderate risk devices may benefit from a post-market clinical follow-up, but it won't be mandatory for them. However, if you decide that you are a lower moderate risk device, you must justify within your post-market surveillance plan why you do not have a post-market clinical follow-up. I hope I've summarized that well for everybody.
Great, thank you very much. So earlier on, I mentioned how useful a CE mark is if you're trying to get your product distributed around the world. If you follow Regulatory Roundup every week, you will see every now and again, there's a new announcement how a country has accepted, for instance, the transition, the MDR-IVDR transition. This is very interesting for me. You see, perhaps you expect Australia to accept the MDR-IVDR transition because they were previously accepting IVDD and MDD products. But what really interests me is when you see a country like Egypt or another countries like that who are now looking at CE mark as a sort of reference to accepting products in the door. So I did a survey some years ago, and I realized that I had always thought if you had your FDA market authorization, you were sort of done for the rest of the world. But actually, the influence, the FDA having a product on the market in the US is great. One country, lots of people, big market. But in reality, the old system and the mutual recognition agreements set up by the EMA actually covers like 54% of the global market. And the FDA is a smaller piece, and there's like 20% out there, which are sort of will go with anything that's out there. So they sort of have their own rules, but in general, they follow IMDRF. And if you use IMDRF, you will actually be able to submit your product anywhere in the world. But IMDRF does not cover the absolute details that you need for post-market surveillance in the detailed level that MDR and IVDR document and require. Does anybody have input on adverse events, recalls, and vigilance reporting?
At least in the US, the information that's publicly available for adverse events, they have to put, like, they have multiple codes that you have to code the event type and what caused it. So you can kind of mine data, and there are different software systems out there that will help you do this more expeditiously. But you can specifically find things that are related to design control failures or manufacturing issues. And that type of information can be really helpful in formatting your risk management file for your own product.
Right. And I also think the US databases are much easier to access. It's like a single point database that you can go and get a lot of information about products. And it's certainly a very good reference to go and do a first search. So if you go and do a first search and you see there's a product with an issue, then look for where else in the world that product exists and see if the authorities in those other regions have also had events. Yeah. Because that is a very useful way to go. But I always tend to go to the FDA databases as my sort of starting point before I go and look elsewhere.
Right. I use Badwal Systems. That is a really powerful tool to get information out of the FDA databases and make it easy to interpret. You know, it does the statistics for you and the kind of family groupings of the problems so that you can get to it.
Right. Yeah.
And then you're right. As in terms of a global problem, I've seen people. In the recalls that I've administered, even though the product was only distributed in the US, I had agencies from across the world contacting me as soon as it hit their radar. Was this product in our country?
Right, right. I had a case where a product was reported in the UK and a letter came in from Hong Kong asking why had this not been reported in Hong Kong. Yeah. This is like, so the agencies are all watching each other. They are all following each other. So that, you know, it's not really possible. It's not very easy to hide anymore. So, and I think this is a whole aspect of looking at these adverse events. This comes onto the sort of the monitoring the competitor landscape. Yeah, if you're going out there with a product, and if you're starting a new project, or you're bringing a new version of an existing product, you're probably already watching your competitors. But it is very good to be picking up the issues that are occurring with other people's products around the world, or even similar products. I mean, this is one of the issues that the pharma companies have had with simple things like pre-filled syringes. They don't have to go and get their CE mark. But if someone else has an issue with the same syringe for a completely different therapy, they're going to have to justify why it's not applicable to them. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole challenging area there that we need to address and be aware of.
And you know, I've had the challenge of being in a clinical review for an MDR certification, and the clinical reviewer did their own research and made their own conclusions about, you know, articles that we did and did not include, and, you know, went to this extreme of finding an article that was about how the device could cause an adverse event in felines, like large cats. Okay. So because it could cause this in tigers, they needed to explain that the anatomy of the tiger was different from the anatomy of the human, and therefore you couldn't paralyze the human with the device.
Other than it's 600 pounds. Very good. Excellent. Anybody have any points to add on these questions here? As just a general open panel point.
I'll address just one of the general comments I saw in the questions and answers, and that was about somebody said these are all guidances, right? And that's just kind of classic industry response to when the guidances add requirements. And the problem with that is that, yeah, guidances are technically voluntary, but they reflect the current thinking of the bodies that issued them. So if you aren't following that, that might be okay, but you need to know what they are, that you're going to get questions that are in ways related to what they expected to see in the guidance document. And that if you're not following the guidance document, you need to be doing it better or have a justification for why you're not following it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've had a situation where, actually a couple of situations. I mean, the risk management one is the classic. At the moment, the FDA are referencing everything to 24971 Annex C for this risk probability. And then we have the other thing with pumps, with wearable infusion pumps, where 60601-2-24 or whatever it is, has become so outdated, and it won't be updated till the end of next year, that the FDA are now referencing to TIR 101, an AAMI guidance, which is really up to date with the testing required from a point of view of dose accuracy and flow rate. And that's a guidance. And it's like, well, the old standard was so outdated, we had to have something that was updated. So you really have to come and show that you're as good as the guidance. So I completely agree with you there. Yeah.
I also could add on the first point, like regarding adverse events, that it's very important to consider the tendency. Because, for instance, so I'm talking about biological evaluation mostly, right? So surely these adverse events or complaints shall be analyzed. And within the company shall be established risk management process according to ISO 14971, right? And there is different probability of occurrence, right? So you need to, every company like assessing this information should categorize the risk, whether it's low, medium, or high. And for instance, when we are analyzing the tendency, meaning the difference between different years, so on and so forth, we could like apply different risk here. For instance, firstly, it was low, so okay, maybe we have one set of mitigation action for this, right? But when risk is medium, so we would have different set of mitigation actions here for this adverse event, right? And it shall be taken into account. So I would like to highlight here importance to observe the tendency and analyze the data. And yeah, like every year, taking into account how many devices were sold, what adverse events or complaints were noticed for this medical device.
Well, and to her point, and to loop back around to this whole global distribution, if you're looking at your competitors, well, maybe your biggest competitor is the market leader in a particular technology. Well, they're going to have maybe hundreds of thousands of units in distribution, whereas another competitor, and so it may look like they have a big problem, but if you understood it statistically, and that's the problem with the data that's available, is we may see that there are maybe thousands of adverse events out of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of units distributed. Then you might have another predicate that looks like it has fewer adverse events, but we don't have the information to know how many units they have in distribution. So they may actually have the bigger problem if they have fewer units in distribution. And so that's going to be, I think, a challenge in the assumptions that you have to make when you're looking across different products and different manufacturers.
Right. I think that is a really valid point, because when you're putting together your whole report, if you think about having to fill out your predicates, you're probably going to pick the top 5 players that come up in the market that are relevant. But at the same time, you're going to have, as you say, smaller players who may have adverse events, which are, you could argue, are applicable, or you're going to have to argue that are not applicable to your product. So you cannot just ignore them. You're going to have to bring them in the list and give a rationale why they're there. Because it could be that you follow up with your following report that they don't appear anymore because they were only there because of the adverse events that had occurred to that time at that time or something. That's something like that. So I think there's a dynamic aspect to this that you really need to allow for when going for your predicate devices.
Mm-hmm. Martin, I just wanted to interject for a moment that in the 10 PSUR common mistakes PDF, which is available for download, the link is here, but we're going to send it in the chat as well. Is the notified body clinician really took companies to task in terms of, you know, putting their evidence in context of global sales, in context of relativity, because the reviewers are unable to determine the real impact of that. So I strongly recommend downloading that. Also, I'd like to take a short break to let you know that our sponsor of this event, Hoodin, has prepared a 2.5-minute video.
Hoodin, 360 Surveillance and Vigilance. Revolutionary monitoring SaaS for life science product surveillance and vigilance. Using Hoodin and setting up a product surveillance and vigilance profile is a smooth and time-efficient task. Just enter the product brand name and the company name. You may enter a product type as well if your product doesn't have a brand name. Select what step in the product life cycle your product is at to get recommended surveillance areas to activate. In just a few seconds, the Hoodin-trained AI provides suggestions on product data needed to set up a perfectly tailored surveillance and vigilance system in Hoodin. The product data retrieved is indication, intended use, critical components, environment, intended user, similar products. To create a tailored surveillance on regulatory updates, Hoodin also retrieves information about what markets the product is marketed on. Once the product surveillance and vigilance profile is created, the Hoodin robots get to work and start monitoring exactly what is needed for your product. Whenever new information is published, they will get retrieved and show up in a feed within your Hoodin project. Longer articles are processed by the Hoodin AI to provide a summary. The AI also translates any article that is non-English. To prepare retrieved articles for reports or sharing them with peers, you may tag the articles and add comments. Hoodin has all the features needed to make your surveillance and vigilance findings actionable. Discover the magic of Hoodin for your unique product and get a free trial now. The first 100 trial signups enjoy a 14-month license for the price of 12 months. Included in the trial is a 30-minute video meeting with an expert to validate your Hoodin project. But that's not all. One lucky winner will receive an entire year of Hoodin for free, for the total amount of €1,668. Access your free trial at hoodin.com/MLV or scan the QR code. The winner will be announced within 2 weeks. Hoodin, your ally in life science compliance and innovation.
We're going to move to the lightning round, Martin. We've gotten a lot of questions.
So, Ajda, how do you think the recent changes will be affecting the whole industry? Big question. Quick answer.
Okay, I'm gonna focus mostly, I see also a lot of questions there in the chat on legacy devices.
Right.
Obviously, I would say the recent changes are positive for those manufacturers, but just to keep in mind that there are conditions to be fulfilled and that the deadlines are kind of short. One thing I didn't have the time to mention in my slides, and okay, it's not directly linked to PMs, but still also among those requirements is the fact that you need to apply to a notified body by next year for your MDR conformity assessments. And we hear that actually it should be done this year to be in line to for them to have capacity. So you can really enjoy this extra time. And of course, I also see some questions there around the guidances that we are still waiting. So many questions should be included in the PMS guidance that will be published. So yeah, just a general, let's say, recommendation is to have kind of a system in place that keeps you informed of those things. And generally in the EU, that should be part of your regulatory strategy, that you do monitor these changes with an impact on your compliance. And this is, for example, what we do with MD law.
Great. Yes, I think that whole thing with the guidance is a big issue. If you see an MDR guidance and you don't have the equivalent for IVDR, look to see if you can augment the MDR guidance for your purpose. You will not be doing the wrong thing if you go down that route. There are some guidances that map across. It's just at the time they were created, they didn't do it. So Karandeep, in terms of periodic safety update reports, what are the common failures that people make and how can they avoid them?
First of all, is not doing one, of course, which is a big red flag for any company. So yeah, definitely, it's a requirement to have one. So please make sure that you are doing it. The second one, of course, is treating it just as a checkbox exercise. Realistically, with a periodic safety update report, it's something that generally benefits you. Let's just remove this idea of medical device regulation out of the way. It's generally activities you want to be doing to make sure that your product is performing as it should be out on the market and you're constantly improving it. So it's not just medical devices. This can be conventional stuff. It could be a car. It could be electronics and your whole. Most manufacturers of products out there want to make sure that these things are actually being done correctly as well. And then, of course, the third part of is just leaving it to the quality and regulatory people to be doing it. Generally, things around PSUR, complaints, CAPAs, etc. is going to be a collective process through the company. So it's very important that everybody sits down and discusses it together. And one of the ways that you can actually do that is through your management review meetings. You can put it as one of your agenda items to actually discuss your periodic safety update report. So I would say those are the three common mistakes that I'm seeing quite a lot.
Right.
Oh, and Karandeep, I see that even for people who are in the US only, is that they're not looking for data on their own devices in the MAW database. And then I will see, like, because users can submit, adverse event reports to the FDA that they may or may not have told you personally in a complaint or told your company. And so I have seen FDA come in and be aware of the adverse events that a company had, and the company wasn't aware of the adverse events they have. So that's a great practice, like he said, to put it in your management review, that you at least review your own company to see if there are any adverse events that have not been either reported to you by the customer or the end user, or reported or forwarded to you from the FDA.
I think there's a really good question here on the legacy devices. Is PMCF mandatory for class 2A and 2B non-implantable legacy devices? You got any comment there, Ajda?
Yeah, I would really say that it depends on the device, because there are, kind of few elements that you would need to consider that PMCF would be really justified not to have one. Long-term safety and performance, it's already known that you have an acceptable risk-benefit ratio. So I could not say it now on the spot whether it's a yes or no, but definitely something to be very well justified if there's no PMCF as it's envisaged by the MDR. There are some conditions there.
I'm going to ask a question of the panel of the European people here. And I think it's going to paraphrase a lot of things I'm seeing in the chat. And that's like, what is the status of Udimed, and when is it going to actually have utility for these activities that we're talking about?
Yeah,
if ever.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So Udimed at this stage, you have 3 modules available and operational. So you can already register you as an actor, you can register your devices, and notified bodies can register the certificates. So when it comes to vigilance and post-market surveillance, that's not yet functional and available. And just last week, the Commission announced that they need to work further on its development, and the full functionality will be in 2027. And then you have 6 months, for example, for vigilance, sometimes even less, depending if there's an incident, or for example, to register as actor. For other things, you have more time to comply with. So just to say that the whole timeline was shifted again to, in now 4 years. But of course, just as a, let's say, side remark, EU competent authorities are already advising to use it for the models that are available.
I mean, I think a key problem is that it's not obligatory right now. So you can go in there and look to see if other devices are there, but what about all the people who are in stealth mode, waiting for it to become obligatory? So I think, yeah, we have to wait. I don't think there's a choice. Although we have to say that if a company's getting audited, the notified body's going to ask them. They're going to be put under pressure. They're not going to just be able to sit there and hide all the time. So I think there's that benefit.
I've had customers who got audited, and their auditor gave them an observation because their importer wasn't in UTAMed, and they're like, that's downstream of me. You know, I'm not in control of their business or their desire to do this what is currently voluntary. And they're like, no, you should make them in their contractually liable for putting it in UTAMed already.
Yeah, we're also seeing a lot of comments like that from notified body expecting the SRNs for manufacturers. But maybe also one thing now in Europe, there's a lot of focus on the whole supply chain and the compliance of it, right? To have quality agreements. Yeah, and of course, I agree. Currently, UTAMed is not mandatory, but it seems for the purpose of avoiding observations or conformities from notified bodies, we tell them better to use it, what is available, and then kind of comply with it, even though if it's not purely strictly mandatory.
Right. I couldn't imagine the EU rep being very happy that the importer isn't registered. I could imagine that would raise red flags. I mean,
and I think another point to add there, guys, sorry, Martin, before it becomes obligatory, learn how to use the system. The last thing you want to do is leave it right until the last minute and then realize you have no idea how to operate it and you make mistakes. So make mistakes early on, but learn how to use the system.
Yeah, it's tricky, and it's almost impossible to correct a mistake if you make one.
Yeah, and exactly, I fully agree. And also the fact that, for example, if you have an incident, you need to register it immediately once it's fully functional. So another thing to maybe already register your devices.
And make sure more than one person has access in the company, because it's a disaster when the person leaves and you have to move the account. Takes forever. So
it's worse in the US, because not only for the electronic submission gateway where we have to submit adverse events, not only is it user specific and we have to have signature certificates that are issued by a third party, but it's also machine specific. So you know, you really you got to make sure you get that computer back from the person who had the access, because it's tricky if somebody leaves.
Right. I saw a really interesting question. Someone trying to get copies of post-market surveillance reports from competitors. I think the only way is to call the competitor. These are not going to be filed documents. But the best way to be able to trace a competitor is actually look to see if there's been any adverse events or whatever reported, because they go out public, but it's currently on all the local databases, which is a bit of a pain. You're going to have to go to each country and look at their adverse event report databases for those reports that have come out each time. So does anyone have a sort of feeling where this is all going? I mean, we're looking at automated tools, right? And we're looking at tools that go and monitor changes. Basically, they tell us, oh, something's happened with a product that you're interested in, or something that's occurred. Does anyone sort of have a vision of how tools will be helping us in 10 years' time? Or how they would like the tools to be helping us in 10 years' time? Yeah.
I think the tools are going to have to integrate so much data and databases, because it's going to be near impossible. MAUD is already, I mean, very technically you can get the data out of it, but it is very hard to get meaningful data and interpret it if you're using MAUD alone without a tool. And I can't imagine, as UDMED has modules added to it, that it's going to get any easier to use or get information out of. So I think without some kind of tool to scavenge and consolidate the data, collate it, it's just going to be an extremely manual and painful effort to not only get data, but get data and make any sense of it.
Yeah, I mean, however much you automate a tool, you're going to and collect all the data. And even if the tool's putting it all into a nice template or creating a nice report, at the end of the day, a company has to be able to say, this is really what we stand behind. This is, we cannot go to the point of automation where people say, yes, this piece of software generated my report for me.
Right.
There is the whole basic responsibility of safety and efficacy of a device. Those rules should not ever be discontinued, and that the liability should remain with the company. I think that's what companies also get a little bit lazy on, and that is they tend to think, oh, my product's got approved, it's in the market. But the conformity assessment people are there to make sure you reach those quality standards to get in the market. And it's the company's responsibility to make sure they uphold those standards on an ongoing basis. And that's why we have post-market surveillance. That's why it's so important. And for years, pharma had pharmacovigilance. Well, vigilance is all about fixing the problem after it's happened, and surveillance is all about fixing the problem before it becomes a problem. So I think that's a pretty key element here. Are you trying to tell me, Sean, I'm running out of time?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we got through all the slides in the slide deck.
Right.
You know, particularly the last one. If you're not subscribed to MedTech Leading Voice, please go to medtechleadingvoice.com. It's free. It's on LinkedIn. Comes every week. There's going to be a short survey. I encourage everybody to respond to the survey because it's going to help our sponsor establish their product market fit and understand your needs better. And I think that's really important. The recording webinar will be sent to everyone tomorrow, along with links to all the downloadable resources. Again, EU MDR compliance has provided a very special, very, very visual guide, which we all know that they're really good at. And so I encourage you to download that. That's a separate download. Please sign up for the 2-week trial. You're really not risking anything. And you have everything to gain. So please do that now. And again, I want to thank Marta Carnielli and Tom Patten for their interview last week. Please download that, as well as Ivan Stoyanov. Very, very valuable insights from the notified bodies that you won't find anywhere else. So please download those. That is it from me. Martin, any closing remarks? Any closing remarks from the panelists?
I think I'd just like to reinforce what Martin said about the company has got to own all this, no matter what the tools do. And this is why you have management with executive responsibility and persons responsible for regulatory compliance. Is, you know, we have this phrase in the US, the buck stops here. Meaning that whoever is in those roles at the company, you know, it's more than just ChatGPT wrote my CER for me. It's like, even if that did, you have to take the ownership of whatever comes out of the tool and validate it against other data that you have about your actual product performance.
I really want to thank all of the panelists. It's been such a privilege to be working with you on this webinar. And also, I would really like to hear from anybody if, was this useful? Do you want to see more? What do you want to see? All this feedback would be fantastic. We don't necessarily, we can't promise to do this every week. This is not the case, but we can perhaps do another one in the future. That's not an issue. We would like to know from you where the pain spots are, what you want to hear about. And I mean, it's just great working with an audience, and it's fantastic working with a panel together, I have to say. Thank you very much. And I really have to thank Sean and Illumino, because their relentless work is what has put all of this together. And it's not just a panel session, it's all of this information that you're getting in addition to download, or what I call the goodies. But really, what does this mean for a company? It means if you have the opportunity to work with Sean, you could really get to your point where you can build engagement with your customers. The customers are always there, but you have to find a way to engage them. And it's not just a matter of a PowerPoint presentation. It's all about a strategy and engaging and creating a dialogue with the people out there. And Sean does a fantastic job with his team in helping companies get there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, well, we had a ton of questions. We're going to round them up. We're going to try to answer them, and we'll try to publish something in MedTech Leading Voice very soon with the answers to the top questions. So if you have any questions that you're dying to have answered, please feel free to email them to me at hello@illumino.co. And I thank you all for your time. Have a great evening, morning, wherever you're located. Thank you, panelists. You were fantastic.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.